And I've been in a public hearing where somebody was chanting behind me, fire the city's planner, fire the city planner. I think those are some of the questions we're trying to grapple with and try to fully understand, but it's going to be transformative.
Yeah. What do you expect the value of a single family lot to do over the next year or so? Does it quadruple? Hi there, folks. Welcome back to another exciting season of the Deep Prior podcast. I'm your host, Joe Fries. This is episode 1 of season 2. Happy to be launching it here early November. Have a plan for a continuous 26 episode season taking us into late spring 2024. That's the plan. We'll see how it goes. Big change this season is we're listener supported. So if you want to contribute to the ongoing operation of the show, please do. You can find out more information on the website deeppriorpodcast.ca. We also have a Patreon account now. That's patreon.com/deeppriorpodcast. If you go there, you can sign up for a $5 a month membership subscription to help keep us going. There's also some exclusive content that comes with that. Also on the Deep Prior Podcast homepage, you can find a link to a PayPal donation button where you can help us out that way as well. There's a lot of costs that go into running this thing, and we'd appreciate your support. Without further ado, now, episode 1, we're starting with Blake Levan. He's the man with the housing plan at Penticton City Hall. So we wanted to start there. Housing is such a wide-ranging issue that's affecting a lot of people these days. We're going to delve into every single aspect of it as the season wears on. But first of all, here we go. Here's Blake Levan. Blake, welcome.
Thanks for having me.
Very briefly, explain your job title and how one gets to be Director of Development Services.
Sure. So as you mentioned, I'm Director of Development Services for the City of Penticton. So I oversee our planning department, which deals with all future development of the city. We do a lot of rezoning and development applications. Also oversee our building department. So we process all the building applications, and then development engineering is really how new development ties in with the city's infrastructure. So roads, sewers, and whatnot. How one becomes in this position, that's a really good question. I'm a background as a professional planner, an urban planner. I'm a member of the Canadian Institute of Planners, and that's what I trained as in university. It's all about how cities are put together and how they grow and future visioning for cities. I've worked with the city for about 13 years in progressively more responsibility as I've gone up, and I think how one becomes this position, I think you can become in this role and other development directors. You do have planners, you also have building officials that go in this role, engineers that go in this role. But I think it's being able to communicate well with the community, communicate well with council, and have the city manager having faith in you to lead these various different departments. So that's how I ended up here.
Last week, the BC government announced that it's brought in the new legislation to permit 4-plex on every single family lot in BC. I want you to explain what that means to us.
Basically, what the province did is they said that every municipality has up until July 1st to amend their zoning bylaws to allow 4 units, and in some cases 6 units, in some cases 3 units. So they're requiring you to update your zoning bylaw to allow 3 to 6 units on areas that are traditionally zoned single or 2-family. So in essence, they're requiring you to do all that zoning that developers would normally have had to go through months of zoning processes to get approval to build 4 units in an area that was single family. So we're still digesting this. I mean, in the timeline of the way municipalities work, I mean, it just happened. So we're going through all the announcements the province has made. We're going through the legislation itself that hasn't been enacted yet, but it's been introduced. We're also anticipating seeing the regulations that accompany the legislation, which are scheduled to come out in December, which are going to talk about things like setbacks and how much parking is required. But in essence, this is the province coming in and telling municipalities that you're not zoning for enough of this type of housing, and we're going to do it for you. So interesting period for sure.
Yes. The distinction for a 6-plex, it's close to transit. I think of places like Vancouver where there's a subway, but do you see that in Penticton? Do you think the conditions would be met?
Yeah, that's something that we're trying to figure out, and I think will be explained a bit more in the regulations, but they do say frequent transit. And does frequent transit mean like our number 5 route where you have potentially 15-minute transit during busy periods? Does that meet that bar? And does that mean everything within 400 meters of that is automatically up to 6 units?
Yeah.
I think those are some of the questions we're trying to grapple with and try to fully understand, but it's going to be transformative.
Yeah. Okay. We'll come back to that. Now, you said just the opposite. There hadn't been a flood of building applications. So are people trying to, like planners trying to digest this stuff?
Yeah. I think if you're somebody that owns property and you're looking to put 4 units on your single family lot, or if you're a developer that has holdings where you build these types of buildings, I think you're probably going to want to wait to see what the municipality does and how the zoning shakes out, because potentially you could skip going through the zoning and the public hearing processes and paying all those fees and skip right to a development permit or a building permit. So I think it was just basically last week that this was announced. So I think the builders themselves are going to take that time to adjust, digest the changes as well, and strategize out how they're going to plan their projects. Yeah.
This is a probably better question for a realtor, but what do you expect the value of a single family lot to do over the next year or so? Does it quadruple?
Yeah. And again, I'm not looking at the crystal ball.
Yes.
The province, the housing minister, did address this and said that was the reason why they did this as a blanket approach. I think there's some really good examples of like in Kelowna when they did their RU7 zone and other areas where if you take a specific area and increase the development potential, you do see a lot of price appreciation. But when it's done on such a blanket approach, I think the theory is that it won't appreciate as much.
Okay.
So I don't know. You take that on faith, and I think you're gonna have to wait to see how the market responds to this. Because the market doesn't always respond how you anticipate it.
I guess thinking now, so a person could invest the time right now in a single family lot to go through and get it rezoned for 4 units, but they've added value, right? So that's the investment in it. But this way it takes that out, so there won't be that intrinsic investment required.
Yeah, exactly. If you're on a street with single family housing and you go through that process to be allowed to build 4 units on it, there is intrinsic value there. You could potentially sell that as a townhouse unit that would be much more valuable than that single family. But that's been taken away now. You can build those 4 units on that whole neighborhood. So.
Okay. Penticton's been doing this for a while. I mean, anywhere you go downtown, there's an infill development, it seems like. So do you think we're ahead of the pack? I know Kelowna's been singled out as having rules already, but Penticton's in good shape, I would think.
Yeah, this is the type of construction that we've been promoting for a long time now. The province calls it the missing middle. In Penticton, I think when we went through our last official community plan update, we really heard from a lot of people that they defined Penticton in terms of what it was not in a lot of cases. They didn't want to be like Vancouver or Kelowna with the density, the high rise. They wanted to really maintain that smaller city feel in Penticton. And to us, that translated to more ground-oriented development, your townhouses, your kind of stacked duplexes, duplex, small lot, infill, lots of carriage house, where you still have that neighborhood feeling. You're not large high-rise building. So that's been the type of construction we've really promoted. And I think it suits our development industry here quite well. We have a lot of small builders that do a dozen units a year in this type of format. And so we're ahead of a lot of other areas in the province where we have allowed for infill in a lot of areas in our city. And a lot of that has to do with our geography. I think you can make the argument that most of BC now is forced into this type of housing because we don't have the ability to sprawl with the agricultural land reserve, the amount of crown land we have here, the sensitive environmental areas that we have. So,
another big piece of housing news this year has been the Housing Accelerator Fund. Penticton City Council applied for $11 million, and there's waiting to hear back later this year. Is that right, Blake?
Yep. So eagerly waiting to get response from that. We know Kelowna got their announcement, and it's sort of trickling down to the smaller communities now. So we are we are very hopeful that we will be successful in getting those funds.
Yeah. What would that 11 million be put towards?
So we had a 7-point plan, and I don't know if I'll remember all 7, but really there was some funds that went to staffing. So bringing on some additional staff to realize housing opportunities. And the stuff that staff would be working on, we had an idea of a parking reduction pilot, where we would identify certain areas of the city and be really aggressive with reductions in parking. Another one was pre-zoning certain areas of the community for more density, doing that analysis to see which areas of the community from an infrastructure perspective would be more suited to that. One of the ideas was to go through requests for proposals to find an architect or multiple architects to pre-design a few plans so that if you're a homeowner and you wanted to invest in your property, you come down to the municipal hall and there's a few different designs of a fourplex or a duplex that you could pick from.
This would be a Penticton special.
Yeah, exactly. So pre-approved, you don't have to go through the development or rezoning process. You would just have to pick the plans and your designer would make it work to your lot. Some of the other bits supporting certain neighborhoods that we wanted to see growth in, like our North Gateway around Hospital, downtown along Main Street. So select areas of the community and really investing in infrastructure in those areas. So there's a whole kind of host of different initiatives that we wanted to use that money for.
Was there a housing czar in there? Someone to take the lead, right?
Yeah, there was a housing team, really, where we would have a 3-person team that would be leading all these initiatives to really just push forward this housing, streamline the application process. And then the other component was unlocking city land, because the city does own some strategic properties in the city and opportunities to work with other levels of government to kind of build housing on those.
The city's application talks about this 11 million could create an extra 407 units over and above what would be built by 2026. So how does all that money, how does that actually translate into units being built? Help us make the connection.
Yeah, so when we had the 7 initiatives, with each initiative, we tried to estimate how many additional units that would unlock over a baseline. And then that's where you get that 400 and whichever units it was. So, for example, having that housing team going out and going to property owners and saying, hey, did you realize that your lot could build 4 units on it based on these criteria? So that team would identify those areas, and we figured we would get maybe 25 units over the life of the 3-year project. So that would be added up. We have some projects identified for city lands. That would be a certain number of units. So all those aggregated together would be on top of our regular construction, our baseline if we weren't doing any of these things.
So to be clear, it's the city not taking the 11 million and building actual houses. It's encouraging builders to build. Okay, good. Okay, now that brings me to my next question. There's a housing needs assessment, and the stats through August, the city had permitted 132 new housing units through August 2023. That compared to 361 housing units to August 2022. It's almost down by a third. So when you see what's actually happening versus what you want to happen, how do you square that circle?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And there's probably a few different narratives on that. I think you have one narrative where that's just, more globally, things are going on like labor shortages, inflation with supply costs. The interest rates right now are making it really difficult for developers to borrow to build. So I think these are all what you would classify as headwinds to the development industry right now. That's slowing down. You have another narrative around just the cyclical nature of development, where we're coming out of a really, really busy period and you're getting a bit of a breath. I think we're seeing people gearing up. I think 2024 is going to be a really busy year with a lot of the stuff that the province and the federal government are doing to try to stimulate housing. So are we the end of one cycle and starting a new cycle? Another narrative could be some of the things that the city's done with raising development cost charges and building fees, and these additional costs in each one in isolation doesn't seem like a big deal, but all added up, are we making it so these pro formas make the development not viable with all these fees included? EIZs, we used to really stimulate construction through giving property tax exemptions and development cost charge exemptions. Those have all kind of gone away because we had such a hot real estate market. We felt we didn't need it. So yeah, for whatever reason, 2023 is turning into quite a down year in comparison to the past few. I think it's an aberration. I think 2024 is going to be a really busy year, but that's just the reality of development.
Yeah. My next question was going to be, there's unprecedented support for housing, but not unprecedented construction. So as you say, it's hopefully just an aberration. It's a down year, and next year we move on.
Yeah, we need the housing. I think it's a serious issue in our community right now. There's so much demand for housing. I think you look at a healthy vacancy rate, CMHC defines it as between 3 and 5% vacancy, and that keeps prices enough. It keeps enough demand for people to keep wanting to build, and yet people can still find housing availability. We're under 1% vacancy in Penticton, so it's such a tight market. Housing is very inelastic, so I think we need the housing like yesterday, and we're not building enough right now to meet the demand that we have right now. So it's something where we grapple with every day. How do we get more permits in? How do we get more construction happening in the community? And I'm optimistic for next year and for a lot of the changes that are happening right now at the provincial level. I think they're inevitably going to lead to more housing.
Yeah. Okay. So speaking of the changes, to be sitting here as a planner, I can't imagine, to put it in a journalism perspective, this would be like the internet changing journalism, whereas, the province is rezoning the entire city. Is it like that for you? Is this unprecedented to talk to the planning community?
Yeah, I think right now, it's a pretty exciting time. And again, everybody's trying to digest the changes and what they mean, but urban planning's always been interesting. I think cities are, especially when you're in a place like Canada where it's a high growth country. BC is a very high growth community. So, it's the rate of change. Penticton grew by over 10% or close to 10% over the past census year. So, you're always seeing change, and you're always trying to manage that growth and trying to anticipate what happens. But I think, planning is it's a really interesting field to study. When I was originally in university, the big focus was on, the suburbs and the geography of nowhere, where you saw through the 60s, 70s, and 80s, the way development was happening. It was automobile oriented, and there was a real push to a term called new urbanism, and to build more sustainably and build with mixed uses and build more walkable and complete communities and smart growth. So I think that was, when I was starting my career, that was the big challenge of the day, was how to do that. And I think that's become the consensus now. That's what all communities are striving for. And that suburban project, whether it's over or not, I don't know. In BC, probably over. But now, the new challenge is this housing crisis. And how do you build enough housing for people? And I think this isn't the challenge that other countries face. I think Canada, being the growing country that it is, it's housing number one. So this is the topic, and it's a really exciting time to be in land development and to be a planner.
Do you think you'd see something like this again in your lifetime? Something and people who aren't policy wonks or interested in stuff like perhaps we are, it's huge, but do you foresee any other change that would be akin to this ever?
Yeah, one of the things, the sneakier things that the government did was really take out the public hearing and the democratic process and the land development. That is probably going to reverberate more than some of the more headline pieces, where there isn't as much ability for people to stop development or maybe be as involved in shaping the cities. And I think that's going to lead to more planning becoming more of, drawing on professional expertise and making recommendations and decisions. When I was in planning school, there was different hats planners to wear. You could do planning that's very much talking to as many people and trying to build consensus, and then, moving forward with the plans that organically come out of that consensus building. or you can have the planner as a technocrat, that Robert Moses in New York City that's
Yes.
building freeways for all these traditional neighborhoods because
this is the plan.
Le Corbusier and building a very hubris way of looking at cities, and we know best, and we're going to go in. And I think some of the moves that the province has made kind of heads in that direction. Like listen to the planners. We're gonna give goals for each city to meet housing targets, and you have to deliver on that no matter what maybe the citizens in the individual neighborhoods think about it. So I could see that being a big theme over the next bit.
When you talk about it's the NIMBYism that the housing minister talked about eliminating. I think you saw about a place in Vancouver where you have these public hearings that go on for 2 or 3 days and stuff like that. I mean, you get longer public hearings in Penticton, but nothing of that sort. Is that your understanding of those long, super long NIMBY hearings that we're trying to get rid of?
Yeah, I think you see it here too. Maybe not to the same extent and the same organizational level, but to give you an example, on Lakeshore Drive, we had I think it was a 6 or 8 unit development that came in, and council made a decision and a long public hearing on it, and then a lawsuit came after, and it was a lot of effort over a fairly minor development in the scheme of the city. But I think people had a vision for what that street looked like, then this one development challenged that vision a bit. So, will you have the same ability as an individual citizen to shape the decisions in the future? And does it give more power to the planners or more power to the council to make these decisions? So I think it's going to be, the 4 to 6 units, a lot. It's the headline stuff, but I think this is going to be more impactful. There's also in that legislation a requirement to line up your official community plan with your rezoning. So for those people that want to help shape their cities, getting involved in those official community plan updates is going to be more and more important, because that high level planning document is going to cascade down into everything, and there aren't going to be those checks and balances after the fact.
You're making me wonder now, Penticton is in the process of updating its OCP, correct? So will that now line up with this new process?
Yeah, we're actually in a really good position because we have our official community plan housing task force. We knew these changes were going to probably impact that process a bit, but I think we were talking about a lot of these things anyway. We started with redoing our housing needs assessment, which said over the next 25 years, we need to find 9,000 additional places for 9,000 additional dwellings in our community. You mentioned at the start, we're limited with our land base, with the lakes and the mountain and the PIB lands. So we're already having these discussions about, do we start sprawling into the hillsides, or do we try to accommodate this through infill, through neighborhood growth areas? So I think we've already been having these conversations at the task force level. The recommendations that they make are going to be very much in line with, I think, what the province was looking for to happen. Probably, though, we may have to go a little bit further than we were originally intending, but we're a lot further ahead, I think, than a lot of other communities, because we're already midstream and updating our official community plan.
I'm going to move on now, but is there anything else you want to touch on in terms of the future of planning, where you see this profession going?
Yeah, the only other piece that I want to touch on that is AI. And that's going to be transformative with probably every industry. But we're just at the planning meetings that I go to and other regional planners, we're talking a lot about how AI is going to change the way that we look at the city, the way that we do our jobs in report writing and communicating. So that's something that I think maybe not in the short term, but certainly in the medium and long term is really going to change the way that planners do their work.
I know judges, for example, there's talk that AI could be the ultimate judge because it'd be absolutely impartial and it could come up with the best sentencing decisions out there. Could the same apply to planning decisions?
Oh yeah. Planners, what we do is we take a lot of inputs and then we make recommendations on paths forward on things. So you're doomed. That's what you're saying. And I wouldn't say judges are doomed. Lawyers are doomed around this stuff. I mean, I think you need humans to check and balance off of what the recommendations are going to be. But we've already started integrating, like, for example, I always get questions about, well, how much is too much development in the city of Penticton? Have we not reached our cap, or what is the cap with the number of people? And, I was curious to see other communities with our land base. And, you go in the AI search engine and you can ask it, give me 10 other communities in the world that have the similar land base with a population over 50,000 or 60,000. And it spits that out in a second. And that would take you, I don't know how long. And then you can bring examples from those communities. Well, we could look like this community in 50 years or 60 years. And I think that's just like a small little window in ways that we can use that tool to help us research and to help us bring examples. So I think AI is definitely going to be a huge force in obviously everything we do, but in planning for sure.
Yeah, I hadn't even considered how AI might impact planning. So that's interesting. Okay, I want to move on now. This past winter, there was a contentious issue in Penticton that had to do with the old Bogner's restaurant site. It's now an office building, and it was long and wieldy. I'm not going to get into that, but at a public hearing, it came out that Blake was a waiter at Bogner's back in high school, and you met your future wife there. And I thought that's just one story that bears reporting. So can you just unpack that a little bit? How long did you work there? And
no, good story. And it wasn't in high school. I actually moonlighted there when I first started working at the city.
Okay, cool.
Help pay some student loans off. And, keep me busy during the summer. I actually worked as a waiter and bartender all through university. Just to help pay for everything. And actually planning, that's where I learned about planning as a career. I worked at a restaurant in Vancouver. I did the breakfast shift, and I'd have developers come in and they talked about developments they were doing, and me eavesdropping and building those relationships.
Do you want to say which restaurant it was?
It was called Elixir. It's not there anymore. Okay. I was in Yaletown.
Okay.
And so we had developers, John Evans and Bob Rennie, and other guys would come in and talk about University, this utopian kind of university neighborhood they were building up on Burnaby Mountain. And the whole Yaletown project was a going concern at that time.
What era? 2000s.
So I think I always worked as a waiter, and when I started working in Penticton, dealing with student loans, did some moonlighting, and ended up meeting my wife. There, she worked there as well, and we got along.
So you were a waiter. What's your wife's name? First of all, Amanda. What did Amanda do there?
She was a waitress there.
Okay. So you just met there over kind of one summer? Like, give us your story here. Was it something unfolded summer after summer, or just the one summer you hit it off?
Yeah, she had worked there, I think, a few years previous. And then I was kind of the new kid on the block with a lot of restaurant and waiting experience behind me. But she showed me the ropes, and one thing led to another, and we had a really nice summer together, and that's still going. Almost 10 years later.
You're married to Amanda. How many? You have one kid? Two kids?
Two kids.
Okay.
Miles and Sarah.
Okay. So there was certainly some magic at Bogner's. So the reason I'm asking this question is it was such a beautiful story, but then on the other hand, this building's gone, and I think you and your staff recommended in favor of redeveloping it. So it makes me wonder, you're a planner, but you're human too. How do you balance your personal feelings and your ties to this community when you've got these hard decisions? Because you're not AI. How does that work for you?
Yeah, and that brings up an interesting debate I used to have with one of the other planners that worked in my office. He lived in Summerland, so every day at the end of his shift, he would hop in his car and drive up the valley and enjoy his own community without the worries of seeing all the developments he was approving. And my argument was always, I want to live in the community that I'm planning for, because you do have that additional vested interest in it. You have that stronger attachment to it. I think when I go around the community, I spend a lot of time walking and riding my bike and enjoying the community. So I think I know the community a lot better than if I had just hopped in my car and drove up the valley. There's something to be said for being that impartial person that's making those decisions based on the facts alone without the emotion. But I think it's probably the difference between being an engineer and being an urban planner. That's important. I think cities are a human project, and understanding humans and the emotional feelings towards the places that we live and and creating quality of life.
Yeah.
We talk a lot about quality of life as we grow as a community. We don't want to grow at the expense of that quality of life. So being in the community, I think, is really important for me. To do my job the way that I need to do it.
How do you get around that though? Personal, if I can't imagine you would look at Boggers and not think about meeting your wife there or whatever. And now it's something else. Is it hard to separate that stuff, or is it just routine for you now?
Yeah. And I don't know if it's my own personality or, my constitution, but being able to compartmentalize things, you just have to do that. It's tough. And especially when you work somewhere for as many years as I have, you get to know the developers. A lot of times when people are making these applications, these are big decisions that you're recommending on, big decisions that council are making, and people's livelihoods are at stake with almost every decision that you make. And people that you may have, maybe not a personal relationship, but professional relationships with them. So you have to be able to manage that. And that's part of, being a professional and trying to compartmentalize certain parts of your life. People that you might play hockey with, and they're coming with an application forward for something, or things that you see in your neighborhood or your neighborhood adjacent. Certain industries or restaurants that you like to go to. It's partly compartmentalization, but it's part of being professional and setting that part of you aside, I guess.
I want to ask this question because occasionally your dad writes a letter to the editor and is generally opposed to some development that you and your team is recommending. So I'm wondering if does that come up at the family dinner table at all?
We try not to talk about those issues to the dinner.
Okay. So new for season 2, because I can assure you that as though you're probably seeing, if you're watching the video version, Blake and I are both 2-dimensional, but I can assure you he's actually a 3-dimensional person. He's not just the director of development services. So I wanted this year, I'm going to ask 4 questions of each guest. I'm borrowing this from self-help guru Tim Ferriss, who has a different 4 set of questions, but they're good. But I wanted to just help people have more of a human connection with these guests and see that they're not just their job. So I've got 4 questions. Blake's going to be the first brave enough to take a stab at them. So I'm going to ask you the questions and you go ahead, Blake. So question 1, I saw blank and wished Penticton had that too. What are your answers?
Sure. So I saw some really great residential development in Halifax, and when I visited there, I wanted to take some of those projects back to Penticton with me. And if I can expand on it.
Of course, yes.
Yeah, a little bit. They really, in their peninsula urban area, they were very progressive with their parking reductions. And it really unlocked development where you had 25 units with 10 or 11 parking stalls and very nice urban design. You get some additional height because you're not limited by your parking. And just it created neighborhood transformation, walkable neighborhoods. So I saw that style of development and I could see that really fitting in well with a community like Penticton that's very walkable, but has flat valley bottom, really good corridors here. So I saw that style of development and I would love to see more of that in Penticton. And I think you will see that style of development coming, not just Penticton, but a lot of communities, seeing the success in communities that have taken that leap in going from parking requirements to parking recommendations.
Okay. Question 2, and I maybe I could phrase this question a bit different, but the question is this. My most spectacular failure at work was blank, and it taught me blank.
So I would say I think it was 2 years ago, we had an amazing development proposal at Con Marina Way, and failed to get council to approve that project, and ultimately it went and turned into a different development form. And it was a shame, I think, for the community. And I think I learned what I learned from that, just making sure that we're giving council all the implications of development when it comes forward. It's not just a decision that's made in isolation of so many other factors. And there are consequences to not approving development as well. That one I think could have been transformative for that area.
Yeah.
The developers have regrouped and they have a really nice proposal coming forward, but I think we lost what could have been something really special.
Yeah. This is the beach house.
Yeah.
Yeah. And okay, as I recall it, so it's quite a lower density than what was originally proposed.
There was a 10-story tower, which would have been fairly transformative along Marina Way, and then there was some lower density stuff, another building on Vancouver Avenue. But what I really liked about that proposal, and what I thought would have fit in very well for the Penticton market, was it had a lot of different types of units. So it had studio units, 1 bedrooms, 2 bedrooms, very mixed building, which I think when you allow for different types of people, you get more diversity in buildings. Really nice development that they have now, but it's all townhousing and they're all very similar, similar units and a lot fewer of them.
So perhaps some untapped potential on that.
Untapped potential.
Okay. Third question. My superpower is blank.
I think we talked about it a bit, learning how to take things in stride and not taking things personally. So I think one of the reasons I'm in the chair that I'm in is just being able to take things as they come and not get too high or low on decisions that council makes or opposition that comes from the neighborhoods, or being able to process information and to not be too emotional about it. I think the right constitution for that.
You haven't said thick skin, but I imagine that's important in your line of work.
It is, Again, back to compartmentalization, being able to set aside things. I mean, I've been in a public hearing where somebody was chanting behind me, fire the city planner, fire the city planner. And, so having a thick skin's important. Wasn't even a project I was working on. It's like, hey, that's me he's talking about.
Okay.
Luckily, they didn't fire me.
Okay. Because the last question now. I've learned not to worry so much about blank. Yeah,
one of the things I think is not listening always to the loudest voices.
Yep.
That very vocal minority. It's something I think I was very reactionary to, and early in your career, I think it's natural to listen to those voices, but with experience comes experience. So I think you learn which voices are important, and to find those voices that are quieter and to get everybody's views on things. And I think not just from the community, but when I look at management and my own team, not always listening to the same people, and there's a lot of knowledge amongst everybody that I work with, and just trying to pull out ideas that everybody has, and it makes us stronger. And me as the leader of this group, to listen to all the voices and not always the loudest voice is important.
Yeah. So that's all my questions. You've gamely answered all 4 personal questions, but is there anything else people want to get tapped into this stuff? They want to learn more. Where do you go for planning news? Any recommendations for people?
Yeah, I would say if you're interested in Penticton and things that are happening with the city, Shaper City, Penticton is an amazing resource. I always plug that. If you don't subscribe to that, I recommend you do. Any big decisions that the city is making, and this is something that was born, I think, out of necessity. We go back to the failures of process. There are some big ones in Penticton's past. Water slides in the line. Kinney Avenue, ultimately, I think council made the right decision on it. But I remember being in, I think it was the Trade and Convention Center. We needed to rent out because we had to accommodate the 300 people that wanted to speak in opposition to that project. But, to me, that was a symptom of not listening to people and not finding out where getting all the comments that we needed to, and doing the right education and telling people or educating people why we're making these decisions that we're making. So Shaper City, the work Joint Club's done has been amazing. I think it's been a real resource for the city to have the Shaper City platform. And I think if you're interested in planning just in general, there's some really good websites out there. One called Planetizen.
Okay. How do you spell that?
Planet Zen.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And it's an amazing resource for planning. It's got articles, mostly North America, so you get Canada and US, but really good resource for the current topics in planning. There's some really good blog posts on there. Yeah.
Okay. Blake, thank you very much for being on. Okay, and we're back. I hope you enjoyed that episode as much as I enjoyed recording it. I have a newfound respect for Blake, knowing that he's not the only guy who's ever had to hustle with a couple of jobs at the same time. That's encouraging news. So anyway, I appreciate you joining us here for season 2, episode 1. Stay with us. We're going to try to stick with the Thursday release schedule for season 2. Episode 2 will be coming up next week, of course. In the meantime, visit deepfryerpodcast.ca. Find out how you can support the show. 2 options. There's a donate button for PayPal. There's also a Patreon membership. $5 a month gets you exclusive access to a weekly roundup of what news actually mattered in Penticton, in my humble opinion, as well as a poll we're going to run on the Patreon website to help people have some input into what topics and guests are on the show. So thanks for listening. Hope to see you back here.